getting started, excuse me, with API management. Before I jump in, a quick plug for API Days. So the organizers, Uri and the other folks, will be in New York next week for in-person and virtual hybrid conference. And they have a promo code where if you happen to be in New York or want to travel there, you can get a free ticket using the API Denver Meetup code. So that's July 27th and 28th. And if you can't travel, there's also virtual registration as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to, or if you have colleagues or friends who are based in New York or in East Coast and you believe they would be interested to join the conference, feel free to share the code with them. It's free and it's still time to register. The conference will be live stream as well, but in person is better.
All right, so what is API management? I will start off with the classic trope of giving the dictionary definition. So API management is a set of people, processes, and technology that enables an organization to safely and securely publish APIs either internally or externally. Common components include a gateway, developer portal, an administrative UI, and reporting and analytics capabilities. Some API management solutions include monetization capabilities. So if people are paying for your API, you got to manage the money, right? All right, so what does this mean in practice? So question for the audience. What kinds of things do most developers not do anymore? What don't you write yourselves?
Authentication.
Authentication, yeah, identity management, security, encryption. Any others? Go ahead.
Frameworks.
Yeah, frameworks. Generally use an out-of-the-box framework, right? Any other examples?
Documentation.
Sorry?
Documentation.
Documentation, yeah, you'll often use a documentation platform that's purpose designed for that rather than building your own. So there's a lot of things in this category here, right? That you don't write your own encryption, you don't write your own framework, you don't write your own database from scratch, right? Billing, identity management. So the next question is, why not?
It's been solved.
Yes. Don't reinvent the wheel. It's been solved. Any other reasons?
It would cost too much, right?
Costs a lot of money. Yep. Anything else?
It changes its part of it, maintain it.
Yeah, you got to maintain something complicated. So yeah, don't want to reinvent the wheel. These are difficult problem domains. Like if you're doing encryption and authentication, you've got to know coding, and you also got to know some higher math. Specialized domain knowledge, it's either going to be expensive to hire someone or time consuming if you want to learn it yourself. It's not a part of your core business. And the most important reason of all, if you fuck this up, it can tank your whole business, right? If you get authentication or security or identity management wrong, it's a big deal. So for that reason, we think API management should be one of those things that you're not writing from scratch yourself anymore. And there's a lot of API management solutions out there that kind of bear witness to this. And the reason for that is there's a lot of things that if you haven't written an API from scratch before, you might not think about, right? Identity, rate limiting, quality of service, documentation, versioning, alerting, logging. So all of these things that you're going to have to write yourself if you don't use an out-of-the-box solution. So basically, API management is this guy from Office Space, right? The interface between the API requests and the back end. So you're probably all familiar with the software development lifecycle. This is kind of the same concept applied specifically to APIs. So this is some of the stuff that you want to include as you're building an API and continually improving it. And along with that, I'll show you kind of Gravitee's approach to these different aspects. So first step, design. We're a big advocate of design first and API first. So you want to get all the stakeholders in a room and figure out what you want this API to be before you start just banging out code or picking the database or front end or things like that. You want some early validations. You want a lot of eyes on how this is going to be architected and how it's going to work. You want some sort of governance. So there's a group of people who get together and kind of make sure that the API it's functioning the way it should and that it's going in the right direction. And you want this kind of cross-functional collaboration. So in our case, we have an API designer that is visually based, so you can kind of drag and drop. So it makes it easy for everybody to look at and understand, and for non-technical people to contribute and make updates. Next thing you want to think about is having some mock data in there, right? If you have some mock data in there, you can have parallel development where the backend people are working on that piece, and the front end people can still build stuff while they're waiting for the backend pieces, and they've got some data they can test out that's in the API mockup. So that's something that we provide as part of our API management solution. And it also gives you some early validation. If you screwed something up, or your architecture, you didn't think it through all the way, some edge cases you didn't consider, this is where some of that might be likely to come out as people are developing the front and back end pieces to that. And you keep the collaboration going. So everybody's looking at the same document and the same mock data. Next thing to think about is security and kind of traffic control and flow. So we have a drag and drop solution so that you can apply those policies in an easy visual manner. So you can see, when you've got rate limiting or quality of service or other policies that you want to apply to pieces of your API. And we have a lot of stuff out of the box, so you're not having to, reinvent these pieces yourself. Next piece is identity, right? So there's going to be parts of your API that are available to anyone, no authentication. And there's going to be other parts like customer-facing data that is going to require customer authentication. And there's going to be admin APIs that require admin authentication. So we have an access manager that either handles that for you or connects to the identity provider or multiple providers of your choice so that you can tie that all into your API into one system. And we support kind of all the standard stuff, including biometrics. Next piece, so you want some alerting. What if something goes wrong in the middle of the night? Sudden slew of error messages. You want some analytics. You want to be able to forecast, when do I need to upgrade my hardware or start thinking about some scaling issues. And you want this for debugging purposes as well, and for testing to make sure that people don't have access to APIs they shouldn't, vice versa. You want some good logging so you can go in and inspect all the data, either for debugging purposes or again for making sure that you have adequate performance. And you can do some end-to-end analysis of kind of all the pathways that the API calls are traveling through the gateway and then back out again. And then the last piece is you want a customer-facing portal for the consumers of your API. So if someone's building an integration that uses your API, they need somewhere to go to find the documentation, versioning, make sure they're on the right version. You want some analytics for them so they can see their usage. You want them to be able to submit a ticket if they need to, or get updated when there's a new version of the API that they might want to consider migrating to. And again, this has access control too, so people have logins to this portal, and then you can grant them access to certain APIs. Some might be public, some might be private, some might need an authentication key that they will access through this portal. And then, of course, you want all this to tie into your CI/CD process. So everything you do with Gravitee, you can do through our APIs. We eat our own dog food and design API first, and we make sure that anything you can do through the UI, you can automate. All right, any questions on the lifecycle stuff, comments, feedback? So let me dive a little bit deeper into Gravitee and the various pieces. So the first piece we have is the API management. So that is the gateway, the admin interface, the portal. So it basically spins up 3 different web servers to handle each of those pieces. And that's where you go to create your API, design it, and that's what I'll be demoing a little bit later on. Next piece is access management. So either connecting to identity providers or being your identity provider And the reason it's good to have a separate abstraction layer here is you can just tie an identity provider like Okta straight into the APIM module, but it makes it harder to change things later. So you might as well have an abstraction layer where if you need to change providers or add features, you can do that more easily. And this is all part of our open source platform. So this is all free to use. You can download it, fork it, build plugins, do whatever you want with it. And it's not feature limited at all. So you have access to all the full feature range of the API management and the access management modules. And actually, these two were just a little bit about Gravitee. So this was 4 developers in France, in Lille, who were working in the e-commerce industry. And they basically were like, hey, I wonder if this is good open source API management, because we're building all these APIs for supermarkets, and it's a pain in the ass to do the same thing every time. And they couldn't find one, so they're like, let's start one. And then that grew until they were like, well, let's make a company out of this. So on top of that, we built some kind of enterprise offerings so we can keep the lights on. So there's a visual API designer, and there's a freemium version of this you can play with. The limits use one API, but you can at least experience and see what's going on. And then there's an alerting engine, so that will manage all of the alerts and logging that comes through your system and keep track of that for you and handle the reporting. And then on top of that, we have a management console that kind of ties them all together, so they're all working together nicely. You can have multiple organizations and multiple environments and do all the fancy high-end enterprise stuff like redundancy, failover, and things like that.
So I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you go back to that last
Yeah.
one. So which components would be running on prod,
Sorry?
on production?
So you could just use the API manager by itself if you don't have a need for any identity management. You can also run the access management, and you can run these yourself on premise, or you can host it with us, or you can do a hybrid approach.
But that would be offline, right? But I'm wondering if there's software components that's actually running in production. So for example, for the monitoring,
Yes.
I'm assuming that that's a production component.
Yes,
right?
that's all production stuff.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah,
is it only that? I mean, or is access management also in production?
yeah, that's all in production too. So we will run that for you. It's not just like here,
Oh, I
you
see.
do it. You
Okay.
can do it yourself, open source if you want to, or you can run that with us, either hosted or
Got it.
production. If you do support contract, you can kind of use the other modules. So yeah, those modules are included in the full enterprise system.
Okay.
So this is the basic architecture. So you've got your consumers on the left-hand side. So there's the application front end. There's the people that might be making API calls. And then on the right-hand side, you've got an identity provider and all of your data. And then in the middle sits Gravitee being the gateway and authenticator for all of that and managing all your traffic, so you can see it and not have to build all those boring pieces yourselves. So if you want to, you can host everything with us. You can do a hybrid approach, so you can have the gateway and the access management local, and then the cockpit running with us. Mix and match, or you can do all on premise. So if it's a secure location or government facility and there's no connection to the outside world, you can run it all behind your firewall and have it all be on premise. And then we're big on making deployment easy, so we support all the major containerization and cloud services. And if there's one that you use that we don't support, let us know. We'll add it to our list. All right, time for demo. Also, if anyone else has questions before I jump in.
What kind of support you guys provide for companies that already have their APIs running that they want to improve?
So coming in and taking an existing API system and migrating it to, we do a lot of that, and we do, people that are migrating from a competitor like Type or Com or Apogee, we can do that, or we can take your existing API stuff that you've written and migrate it to the platform. So that's all stuff we can help with. This is a little bigger so you can all see it. All right, so this is the API management admin console. So this is where you go in and create your APIs and manage all of your plans and your rate limiting and traffic flow and things like that. And then the other piece is the consumer portal. So I'll show you what that looks like once I've built a couple of quick APIs. And then the piece you don't see is the gateway itself that handles all the traffic flow. So this is something you can get up and running in 5 minutes using Docker. We have Docker container you can download and run this and start playing with it. So I'm going to go to the APIs tab and click +sign for new API. And for the purpose of the demo, I'm going to import a Swagger file. It's just a simple demo example. And I'm going to make sure to include mock data in here that's in the Swagger file so that that's available for testing out the API, as you'll see in just a second.
Do you support newer versions of OpenAPI as well, or?
Yeah, and we try and be as protocol agnostic as possible. So we want to support all the legacy stuff, so you don't have to throw away everything you did. You can just kind of put Gravitee in front of it, do some transformations on your data, and then you don't have to kind of like start from ground zero. So it's imported the API now. It says Bookshop, a simple Bookshop API. And what I'm going to do is start the API. It's now running. I can make calls to it. I'm going to publish it to the consumer portal so it shows up in there, and then make it public so that anybody can access it. Now, the next thing I need to do is tell Gravitee who's allowed to use this API. So I will go into the plans section here, and I'm going to create a new plan. This is just going to be a simple public keyless plan, so anybody can hit this API and get a return. So on the next page, we'll be telling it what the authentication type is here. So no API key needed, just a keyless public plan. And then there's some options for rate limiting that you can set here, or you can set them later on. So I'm just going to save this as is. And this is still in staging, so I'm going to go ahead and publish this to the portal and do a sync to deploy my API. So make sure everything in here is in the gateway. So I've got my API running, I've got a plan running, so now I can go over and make an API call to this API I just built. So this is the root of the API, and then I put in Bookshop for everything, all the endpoints underneath this. So I've got an API call for books. There's a mock data in here, just one book from Charles Dickens. You can also pull up orders. So these might be a record of orders that are in the system. Obviously, this isn't something we want public-facing in production, so we would go and make a plan that required an API to be able to make this call, but just for the demo, we're going to leave it public in the interest of simplicity. Any questions so far?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could you please elaborate on card and payment gateway? How do you work with that? Because right now, if I can connect to third parties gateway, I don't care how does it operate, how do they connect it with banks, because if I need international payment, that's getting too complicated. So
You're talking about like monetizing your API,
Yes.
so people
Yes.
pay to have access.
yeah,
How do you track
payment
that?
gateway.
Yeah, we support that, so you can integrate with a payment system, and you can have plans where you have API keys that expire or might be, for the term of their contract. So that's all stuff that we can support, so that you can have a monetized API.
Yeah, so I will need to do the same way like with Swagger. I have to connect with the third party's payment gateway. Okay.
Yeah, so you would have a payment system where they
Yes.
pay,
Yeah,
and that
they
tells
already
Gravitee, this
enable-
person is authenticated, and here's their API key, and here's how they expire the key, get a new one if they need to, etc. So yeah, that's all.
Okay. Thank you.
Question.
Like, what options do you have of handling requests? Like, what do you do once the request comes into the API? You saw like you can put it on the message queue, or what else?
Yes, so if I go to the design flow, this shows me what I have right now. So right now, all I have is mock data. So I've got a request that just pulls back mock data. And you can see the endpoints here, like I can call books, I can call books/ID, orders and orders/ID. And then there's some parameters in here. And then over here on the right, you have all the different policies you can apply to the request in either direction. So there's security type stuff. You might require an API key. You might want to add rate filtering to this. Like say it's your free API and you don't want requests from the free folks, drowning out the requests from the paid customers. So you can do some rate limiting and traffic shaping. So you can drag and drop these policies onto there.
But how do you push it later on to the backend?
So once you make changes in there, you just click that deploy API button, and then that pushes those changes to the gateway. And then you put in here when you're designing your API what the actual backend API calls on.
Okay,
I'll show you where that's.
So you just route the traffic from the front end to the backend. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're controlling all the traffic, we're authenticating who's allowed to do what, and then that passes through to your actual backend API calls or whatever data provider that you're providing.
Nick, one more question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So there's all these different policies over there, but I'm wondering if you had some like really strange like custom set up for some sort of legacy system, like how would you create a new policy?
Yeah, so we do have a plugin system where you can build plugins and modules, so you can add to this list with custom stuff, and that's something either you can do or we can help you do, and that's all available as part of the open source system as well, so people can share plugins they've written, or if it's a weird custom thing that very few people use, you can write something and share it, and other people who use that could benefit from it. So yeah, it's you can go and if you want to contribute to the development of the open source portion of Gravitee, you can, whether it's the core modules or plugins and other add-ons. All right, I'll show you documentation real quick on the portal, and then I will show you a method of creating the API through a wizard rather than importing the Swagger file. All right, so go back to my API here. We know it's running because we've done a test run. And now when I go into the consumer portal and I look through all the APIs, here's the bookshop one I just created. I can go view it. It's got a description. I can contact the owner of the API if I've got an issue or need to raise an issue, and there's a simple ticket tracking system here to do that. I can subscribe to this API so I can be notified if there's updates, new versions, or new documentation. There's a general information page that I'll show you how to customize, and also documentation, which I'll show you how to set up. And then people can also rate your API, so you can have a marketplace of APIs that your consumers can go in and look at and check out.
Nick, is there a way to version the API, like as a customer can come in and say, I want to use version 1 or I want to use 1.5 or 2.0 or whatever?
Yeah, so you can set up the versioning in your API, and then it will show them the different versions. So you could have, current plus 2 back supported, and then anything older than that is deprecated. So you can do that if you want to. All right, so documentation, going in here to the pages system. Since the Swagger file includes some documentation, I can just publish that straight to the portal. So that is now live. And now if I go to documentation, that shows up here, so you can kind of expand all the different endpoints, see what the parameters are, see what the mock data is, what code should be returned when. And then for the general information, I'm going to go in here and create a new page from scratch. So I can go in here plus the plus sign. Just going to do Markdown. I'm going to set this as the home page. I'm going to publish this page. And save it. So now when I go to the portal, the general info page is the base root homepage. Make sure I published it. Yep, it should be published. There we go. So here's the section I just customized, and you can go in there and do all the formatting and images and other stuff you want. You can create multiple documentation pages. So say you need a documentation for version 3 and version 2 and version 1, you can separate those out into different documentation. And I'll show you here, this is version 1.0 of the Bookshop API.
So when you enabled that API, is it just using the mock data, or are you actually having it pass through and like calling a real API right now?
No, it's just using mock data. The next example, I'll call an actual API so you can see how that works. So speaking of, I will go in and create a new one using kind of the step-by-step wizard. So now rather than importing, I'm going to click on create. I'm going to give it a name called Echo. Then I got to tell it what the path is, separate it from the other API that's at the same root domain. And then I got to give it a version, so this will be version 1.0. Next, this is where I tell it what the back end is. So, sure. So this is just a simple Echo API that we set up for testing purposes. It just returns your API request, so you can see that things went out and things came back, and it was the same things, and everything talked to each other. All right, so it makes me create a plan. Again, I'm just going to make a public free plan. Make that keyless. Public. Not going to set up any rate limit or anything. Click on next. I'm going to skip documentation, and then I'm going to create and start the API. So now we've got our second API here called Echo. I'm going to make sure this is published to the portal, and it's public. So now when I make a call here to Echo, oops, let's check that, make sure everything is in place. So it's public, details. This is not hosted on my machine, hence this logs. Sorry. Let's try that again. I might have gotten. We've got the link for the. You know what? I'm just going to delete this and start again because I messed up something here. If you're deleting an API, you first have to delete the plans, and then you have to turn off the API, and then you can delete it itself. So you don't want you accidentally deleting something that's in the middle of being used by people. You know what? Probably this to do the full sync with gateway. So I'll just restart it and then recreate the plan. And this is an example of why you never do live demos unless you are Steve Jobs. As the saying goes. I actually worked with somebody who used to assist with the kind of behind the scenes for Steve Jobs demos back in the next days, and he had some stories. If you want to hear them, come see me afterwards. All right, so we're going to publish this plan and deploy the API. I think that was the missing step. I got the syntax on the API call. We'll just start from scratch. Plan first. Let's try this again. So create, echo, slash echo, version 1. Backend, there we go. I pasted it so no typos this time, hopefully. And use keyless. Security on the API. The documentation, so we'll skip that. Public. And there's public. Alright, fingers crossed. There we go. Ta-da. All right, so this is just echoing back the request that came in. So I think I got the backend URL on, which is these things missing. Now if I go into the portal and I go here and do explore APIs, I can see both the Echo one I just created and the bookshop, so I can go and interact with each of those and subscribe to them separately. I can go in here and make documentation if I want to. And then down here is where you got the designer where you can drag and drop these policies onto there. You know, there's all the other stuff, analytics, notifications. I won't jump into too much deeper than that, but you know, you can download this and play with it and just kind of either run it locally or run it in the cloud and start tinkering and building your own APIs if that's something you haven't done before. All right, any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So when you're implementing the backend, what does that look like? Like, how do you sort of set up this thing that we call the backend? How does this like handle any? Does it handle like the component on the
Yeah.
side? All that stuff?
So typically it's a call to a backend API that's only accessible to you, that it's gatekept to get that access to, that then, you know, pulls from your database or wherever you're pulling that data from. So you still build those pieces, you just don't have to worry about managing them. You just have to work, return data, and then Gravitee takes care of all the rest.
Yeah.
So
You mentioned how it was set up with some of the like Kubernetes and some of these AWS options. Just trying to conceptualize what this looks like.
It takes a little while, and you know, I'm new to Gravitee, and I've done API stuff, but I've never dealt in API management, so it took me a while to wrap my head around like how all the pieces fit together. But yeah, typically, you know, Gravitee takes the public API request, make sure you have the rights and you are who you say you are, and then once it's made all that determination, it also looks at traffic shaping, transforming the data, doing anything else you need to, and then it goes to the backend API call, which you know the backend folks would have built as part of the kind of API design first process.
I don't know if that's what you were showing me in the Echo, but I have some of the problems myself. Like I'm trying to get a MVP up really quick on an app, and I want something to like accept my post request.
Yeah.
So is that pretty much what the Echo was showing? Like I'm send like a fetch request.
Yeah, it's just a sample backend API that's running on our services that you can just call to make sure that things are going back and forth. And you know, if I got it wrong, then obviously it wasn't working, then I got the right URL in there. And then you can replace that later. So it could just be a placeholder until the backend pieces are built, and then you plug those into the API, and then you're getting real data instead of mock data or just a sample API call.
Is there a way, like, it's probably, but how you guys implement that? Like,
secure connection to the backend. For example, if I still don't want Gravitee to talk to my API directly, like there's a way to authorize Gravitee.
You mean like have additional layers of
Yeah,
like
so like
authentication or data transformation?
let's say like my endpoint is like, let's say an VPC, like a private cloud.
Yeah.
And like only there's like some security. Do you guys have to set up?
Yes.
Or,
Yeah, we can do whatever advanced security you need to like get into a private cloud where the data lives. And you can either put the gateway, behind the firewall or in a DMZ, or you can put it somewhere else and just have it be able to authenticate or talk to wherever the backend is.
so those things are going to be set up in here, not in my backend. So if I, for example, there is configuration in my backend, like only like take this header.
Yeah, and you can limit it, so you can say only these IP ranges can call this API, or
You
we
guys
also
get-
have some, we're starting to do some kind of like UEBA type stuff where we're looking for malicious patterns of access, so that say your customer always logs in from the US and all of a sudden they log in from China, well, that's probably not legitimate, right? Unless they've suddenly taken interest. So you can set up stuff to have rules and heuristics detect for that, and you can also put in place explicit rules of like who's allowed to connect, what time of day, what IP address, where they're coming in from.
So those connections to this IP endpoints like that you are publishing here, are they going to go through you guys, or like there's going to be direct connection to my endpoint? Like how?
It always goes through the gateway, and the gateway can be hosted, it can be on your cloud, it can be on-prem, or it can be hosted by us. So you can set that up however the way you prefer that matches, your security model and your auditing requirements and things like that. And again, the logging and alerting so that you can prove to your auditors, like, yes, our API is actually secure, we're meeting whatever financial or healthcare or other requirements that they put in place.
So would the sequence be that you design the API through Gravitee, then you develop the backend, you QA the backend, and then you QA Gravitee plus the backend?
Well, you can actually do the front end and back end at once if you're using some mock data, so that people can start calling those APIs and getting some sample data back, even though there's no back end yet.
Okay.
And then the back end folks will be working on the back end pieces and plug those in place of the mock data or just the sample API calls as they go. So you get an approach from both ends, and then if problems show up, the nice part of that API design first is those are going to show up before you have the front end people sitting around twiddling their thumbs for 3 months waiting on the back end,
Right.
or other kind of scheduling delays like that. So it surfaces problems faster, it lets people work in parallel, and it's makes it so that everybody's working off of the same template. That people don't have different ideas of what the API call should be, or different Word docs with their own interpretations. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks for coming. I run the online community at Gravitee, so if you need help with anything, come to community.gravitee.io. Ask a question, anything simple, just getting started, we're happy to help. And then, once you played around with it and gotten to try it out, again, if you have more advanced questions, come on there. All of our founders are really into open source and the online community, so they're in there answering questions, the people that wrote this code, so they really know what they're doing, and it makes my life easier. I don't have to answer every single technical question myself.